It is my pleasure to welcome you to this webinar on language development in bilingual children. Our speaker for tonight, Madame Annie Bourret. Annie is a professional linguist and a children's author. She's originally from Quebec, but she's lived in English-speaking Canada for the last 22 years. Her experience of living in a minority context has allowed her to work in a variety of projects, research projects, dealing with language acquisition in preschoolers in minority setting, early bilingualism, and also strategies to promote French acquisition in children before entering grade 1. It is a pleasure to share her expertise with you tonight, and I am now going to hand it over to her. Thank you.
Good evening. The webinar we're presenting tonight is the result of 5 years of work, including workshops given on early childhood bilingualism across BC. They were offered to parents, and it became so popular that the BC Francophone Parents Association, pardon me, it's not the official name, it's BC Francophone Parents Federation, has decided to develop a set of resources that will be a bit more permanent and a bit more accessible. So the PowerPoint presentation is entitled Bilingual Language Development. This is what we're going to cover tonight: the uniqueness of bilingual language development. We will answer frequently asked questions about bilingualism in young children. We will tell you how to support young children's bilingual language development, and we will present a unique bilingual resource online. Now let's start with, what is language development? It refers to the stages of children learning language. I mean, learning sounds, words, and concepts. Traditionally, linguists will consider that this is a period covered from birth to the age of 7. But neurologists say now that language development starts actually during pregnancy. I will talk about that a bit more later in the presentation. The brain synapses with regard to language are starting to form in the 34th week of pregnancy. Those 3 points are valid for all children, be they unilingual or bilingual. But bilingual development has unique particularities because it happens during early childhood. So what makes it so unique? Well, children are learning to speak while learning 2 languages at the same time, at birth or during early childhood. And usually, one of the 2 languages is always almost a minority language. So all the information normally processed by a young child during language development is presented in 2 languages, all mixed up. It is very rare that the 2 languages have the same social or legal status, and usually there is less exposure to the minority language, as it is not as present in the dominant society. And there are a few more important considerations. What does it mean exactly to learn 2 languages simultaneously? Well, unlike young unilingual children, the young bilingual children are learning at the same time 2 sets of sounds, 2 sets of vocabulary, and 2 grammar systems. They have to process twice as much information, and they also need to differentiate it and associate it with the proper and relevant language. In our situation, French and English, it means that they have to learn 36 sounds in French, 44 sounds in English, and they don't necessarily match. They have to associate chien and dog, or even pitou and pooch. And they have to also distinguish between structures such as as-tu or did you. In other words, a picture is worth 1,000 words. This is what happens. Everything is being bombarded at the child. And in our context, the children often experience what is called early childhood bilingualism. There are 2 types. The simultaneous early bilingualism, that defines 2 languages from birth. It is a strong bilingualism. We call it additive bilingualism. Successive early bilingualism is the acquisition of a second language while the child has already partially learned a first language. For instance, because the parents move to a context or setting where that first language becomes a minority one all of a sudden. It's still a very strong type of bilingualism, but it would be normal for the child to go through a silent period where he observes and learns because now he needs to function in that second language. If a child learns a second language at the age of 6 or 7, which is towards the end of the language development period, then we consider that late bilingualism. There's a huge distinction. When you already know a first language, you are a late bilingual if you begin a second language and you use your knowledge of the first language. So you no longer need to learn the concept of asking a question, of knowing tenses that, or learning tenses like past, present, future. You already know that. You will try to find and learn that in the second language. And the later the bilingualism is acquired, the more knowledge can be transferred. Some ability will be lost, though, like pronunciation. In my own case, I became a bilingual individual at the age of 30. You can still hear the French in my pronunciation. I actually still make mistakes after 22 years. Now, let's move to frequently asked questions. The first one being learning 2 languages from birth, like really, 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 really? Oh yes, it's the best way to become bilingual, and the specialists are unanimous about this. In fact, they say that the optimal learning occurs up to the age of 6 or 7. Some say only until the age of 7. It concerns the plasticity of the brain. It's a complicated business. Let's not get there. There's also a myth associated to learning languages from birth. Some people will claim that, in fact, it's much better that the child learns a second language at a later age, because then he will have a good basis and he will transfer his knowledge to learn the second language. Well, we have talked about that briefly. It is true. There is still a transfer of knowledge, but in reality, and even if you can become a strong bilingual individual at an early age, if you don't expose the child to that language, that second language, at a very, very early age, you are depriving him of several years of optimal learning. Now, let's get a closer look at that optimal age. This is a graph taken from a video, The Linguistic Genius of Babies. It's presented by a searcher called Patricia Cole. You can actually view this video, and I encourage you to do so, in our bilingual website entitled Un enfant, deux langues, one child, 2 languages. Now, the way to read this graph is horizontally. The high level of competence starts as very, very early in age. It's maintained until the age of 7. By the age of 7, it starts to decline, and the older you get, the less optimal it is to learn a second language. What we mean is basically it's more difficult. What happens? What do we call them linguistic geniuses? The babies who are learning 2 languages at an early age. Well, they listen to their environment and they compile statistics. The more frequent sounds are considered significant, meaningful, they're stored. They are needed to communicate. The less frequent sounds are forgotten, discarded. This is why it is so important to expose the child to both languages, and especially the minority one that is less, as it is less frequent, very early on. And as we have already mentioned, this compilation of sounds can start even before birth. The capacity to learn a language can start at the 34th week of pregnancy. That's the period when the brain synapses concerning language are forming. That's from a report from the Institute of Medicine and National Research Council of the United States. Okay, fine. We do that, but how do we do that exactly? Well, you expose the child, the developing baby, to the minority language by singing to the baby, listening to the radio, having conversation in that minority language. It is proven that babies recognize their mother's voice after birth. The same applies to language. Now, let's think about what happens once the baby is born. Should bilingual families use the one parent, one language approach? It's a proven practice. It dates back 1902. It has been developed by a linguist, a French linguist named Maurice Gramont. It's been used by another linguist in 1913 in the first case study of a bilingual child from the cradle. It was his own son. It must be a decision made by the couple. It is an enriched model. It is ideal because each parent uses the language is most fluent. It's actually mother tongue fluency level, and it exposes the child daily to that language, but it must be a mutual decision by the parents. And it's also a habit that could be hard to maintain according to certain situations. So it can be flexible. You don't have to be rigid about it. You might have to evolve with the situation as the child grows up according to the people who are around you. You can negotiate what can work as the child grows up. Each family must find a balance. So there would be the potential for a feeling of exclusion as the child grows up. For instance, let's take an example of the English-French family where we try to expose the child to French. Well, at the very beginning, when the child is a baby, there's no apparent problems. As the child grows up, the Francophone parents wishes to increase the child's exposure to French. For instance, through sleepover songs, books, TV, or inviting other French speakers to the home. Well, then it might be tough for the non-Francophone parent. The non-Francophone parent could also expect that the family speaks English if he's there, and that kind of defeats the purpose. So you must find a balance. You must negotiate. You must not be rigid, but it is still one of the best practice to produce very strong bilingualism in children. Now let's talk about the role of the Francophone parent. It's a very important part in the bilingualism of his child. What is crucial is to make a habit of speaking French with the child and get the support and the buy-in of the non-Francophone parent concerning the usage of French. So there you go. It's that balance you have to find about exposing the child to French, even if one of the parents doesn't speak French. What is useful and very useful are French playgroups, daycares, early education centers, etc. And we in BC have French Strong Start centers. We're very happy about that. They're called Franc Départ. They are in 6 towns. If memory serves me right, it is worth registering and participating. Now, if the Francophone parent hasn't made a habit of speaking French with the child, it is never too late to start that habit. Speak French and read in French to your child. Do it progressively. It is much more important than you think, and here's why. By exposing your child to French, you will promote French. You will give it a social affective dimension. It means that the kid will associate affection to the language, pleasure, fun, because he's having a relationship in French with a significant adult in his life. It will give the child comfort with French. It will give him fluency. It will use him to listening, speaking, and enrich his vocabulary. It will also develop his identity. And it will facilitate its integration into Francophone environment like playgroups and school because the child is already comfortable, used to French, even fluent in French. So what are the key elements? This is very important. The degree of comfort and fluency of a young bilingual child in each language will be reflected by the degree of exposure to each language. It's like sport. The more you do it, the better you're at it. Young children are often compared to sponges that absorb everything, but they can only absorb what they are given. So we must think about the frequency of the proportion of their exposure to French. because there is a critical threshold. To develop strong bilingualism in both languages, the critical threshold will be to be exposed to each languages at least 30% of the time. That's according to a professor at McGill University, Fred Genesee. We mean by that all forms of languages: reading, listening, watching, playing, all the forms that language can take in your life. And if the child is awake for 84 hours during the week, I always shock people with that figure, 30% corresponds to 20 hours of that week. So let's look at what I call the linguistic bank account of the young bilingual child. It's a table with comments showing you various proportion of exposure to English and French. The dots represent exposure to English. The solid black represents exposure to French. At the bottom right, you have 30% exposure of French. At the bottom left, you have 0 exposure to French. So how to understand this graph? Well, at the age of 5, a child has a linguistic experience of about 22,000 hours. That being 12 hours a day or 84 weeks per week. Now imagine that every hour means $1 in a bank account. Then the unilingual child has a linguistic capital of $22,000. The bilingual child has the same capital, but it is distributed in 2 bank accounts, one for each language, as shown in this graph. And the exposure reflects the amount in the bank account. Now, if you look at this graph and you look at how much English is still part of the life of the child, I hope this would reassure people who fear that exposing a young child to French in an English environment will be detrimental to learning English. All the environment reinforces English, and it is crucial that the child gets 30% of exposure to French. This is why it is so important to promote and maximize the hours devoted to French, especially if your child is going to go to a French school. At the age of 5, the child will have another year of opportunities for learning French before entering the formal school system, that is grade 1, where language is also used as a learning tool. So, according to the graph we've seen, the optimal age, the child still has 2 years before brain plasticity begins to increase. It means it is crucial to promote French at this stage. Now, let's move to the non-francophone parent. What's his role? Well, he can still play a role in a strong bilingualism. What is crucial is to show a very positive attitude towards French, to be very encouraging, even if it's expressed in another language, because it gives the child security and relevance. Examples of how you can do that. So what did you do today in your French grade group? The child answers, way to go. You've shown interest in what the child does in French. How do you say apple in French? Merci, or muchas gracias. It shows interest towards French. It reassures the child that this is important. It is relevant. And support the francophone parent. Now, the ideal, of course, would be to learn French. For the child, this is the ultimate confirmation that French is very important and that you care. It will also give him an expert role. He will teach you French. What is useful too is to read to the child, even if it's in another language, because they are transferable skills. It's a reinforcement of literacy in a bilingual way, a reinforcement of bilingualism, because those same skills will be used in both languages, especially if we're talking about Latin-based alphabet languages. But remember the critical threshold though. And we've talked about the feeling of exclusion that might be experienced by the non-francophone parent. Again, yet a vast number of people, parents, attribute a high enough value to the bilingualism of their child to accept that they might not always be part of their activities. There is a book entitled Language Strategies for Bilingual Families from Suzanne Barrow Howard. It is on our website. It indicates that 30% of the parents she interviewed, 30% parents of bilingual families felt a bit excluded, but yet they were thinking that the bilingualism was so important that they could deal with a few years like that. You can go to the website and have a closer look yourself. We will get back to frequent questions about young bilingual children. Mixing languages, big cause of concern. Is it normal? Should I be concerned? Well, code switching, as we call it in linguistics, the mixing of languages is a normal stage of bilingual development. It will decrease with age. Think a minute. The child would not be mixing languages if he weren't learning two languages. It is perfectly normal. And as the child will become more competent between the two languages, become more aware of his bilingualism, will increase his vocabulary, will start make the differences between the rules, the structures, well, those will decrease. Usually it's based on vocabulary. I will give you an example. For instance, a child will say, "Où troque maman?" Assume that this is a French situation. Mama is francophone. Well, the child doesn't know how to say truck, camion in French. He doesn't know the word because perhaps he plays with daddy with his truck and it's in English. Well, tell him. You have to keep in mind two very important concepts about that. Is that the child will understand many more words than he can produce, than he can say himself. And if he doesn't know the word in one language, he will simply use the word that comes to mind. So for instance, if the child doesn't know how to say truck, well, you say it's camion. In French, you say camion. If the mixing is about something like juice, well, the kid would ask, juice mama, juice mama. Well, you can ask, tu veux du jus? To help the child learn the word. It's enrichment of the vocabulary that will decrease mixing languages in early age. The sponge must analyze, remember, maman dit lait, daddy says milk. It takes a bit of time to get there. Now we'll talk about how you can promote French every day, especially here in Western Canada where French is very much a minority language. The 4 R's. It's an approach that I have developed over several years. It started with 3 R's. I added rewarding after a few years. What you have in front of you may seem a little bizarre. It's an English rendition of the French concept. Routine. It's an activity that is regular and predictable, such as reading a book every evening, brushing your teeth, preparing a snack to take care. What it does, it gives the child a feeling of emotional security in French. It promotes French by making it a part of his regular activities. Rejoicing. Well, for those of you who speak French, that was rire in French, laughter. It's choose games or activity that the child loves, like watching TV, DVD, singing, playing hide and seek, reading. Rejoicing in French will strengthen the family ties. It will make for wonderful memories, but it will also promote an effective dimension. And the element of play would also help the child acquire more knowledge in French because you can play. You can pretend play. For instance, you can say, well, so you're the cashier at the supermarket and I'm your customer. Okay, let's start. Or you're the cat and I'm the mouse. You must run after me and tell me where I'm going. En français, don't forget. Now, let's find what I hid in the bag. You ask the questions. Repetition, that's different than routine. Actually, repeating the linguistic content, repeating the language until the child becomes fluent and very comfortable. For instance, singing Frère Jacques until the child knows the words and the melody. or reading the same story over and over and over again. It gives a good anchor for language learning. It promotes French. It gives them comfort. And especially the story, his favorite story, never stop reading him his favorite story. It gives patterns. It imprints them in his brain. Rewarding. In French, again, for those who speak French, it was la réussite, the feeling of success. This is what gives the child a sense of confidence and competency. Nobody likes failure. So if the activities that are making him feel successful, or you say, good for you, I'm proud of you, that's great. Oh, you know that word in French, fantastic. He will associate experience. It will build self-esteem in French, and he will want to repeat it. Again, nobody likes failure. So if the child is not equipped with speaking French, it may seem like a chore. Not pleasant. Now, I can almost hear you think, well, 4 R's, easier said than done. Well, it's not that difficult, actually. Let's have a look at the 4 R's in action using the example of songs, for instance. Well, you can establish a routine of singing in French according to an activity or to a situation. When you wash your hands, when you're in the car going to the daycare or the supermarket, you sing. An example to the tune of London Bridge is falling down. C'est comme ça qu'on se lave les mains. This is for hand washing. On les savonne, c'est comme ça qu'on se lave les mains. On les rince et on les sèche. If you want, I will give you the English rendition. This is how we wash our hands. We lather them and we lather them and we rub them. This is how we wash our hands. We rinse and dry them. This can become part of the daily activities, and you can turn them into a play. You can mime them, you can dance on it, exaggerate the pronunciation, make it very slow, make it very fast, use the big voice of a giant, a small voice of a mouse. You can play endlessly with that, and you can practice and sing often. That will be repetition, until the child knows it enough to sing it alone. They will be successful and competent. And if the non-Francophone parent is learning French, well, there's an opportunity to teach the song to him. We have a wonderful set of resources on our website. It is an adaptation of Leap BC from 2010 Legacies Now. It's called Grandir en français in French. Those cards often integrate the 4 R's. They all propose a book with a theme. Very often they are songs and poems. And if you don't know the song, we also have a CD on the website that you can download, and it will give you the melody of the song. Now, I will talk a bit more about the activities, the ideal activities to promote French, perhaps a bit not talking about the 4 R's, but talking more about language acquisition. What would be the ideal activities? Well, children learn by observation and imitation. So be a model. You are their most important model. Promote French in your behavior. Do activities that you and your child like. Have fun in French. Show it. And your child will be much more likely to imitate your behavior. In other words, saying, speak French, it doesn't work. Now, the exposure of French, the model you offer to your child should include listening, speaking, that is oral expression, talking, and vocabulary. Now, I will explain why listening is so important. Most people think of it as a very passive thing. You're there, you listen. Actually, it's a very active process. The child is analyzing. Remember when I said how babies learn language? They compile statistics. They compile the sounds they hear. Again, and you will know that for the rest of your life after this presentation, there are 30 sounds in French. There are 44 sounds in English. The child needs to hear them. They need to train the ears for patterns. For instance, in the three first words, bain, pain, main, which are bat, bread, and hand, there are 4 sounds. The rhyme provides 1 sound, and the first letter provides 4 the sounds. Same for ballon, bateau, provides the concept of a syllable. You have similar examples in English right away after those words. Hat, cat, rat, back, bag, bat. Also, listening helps with them, and actually a higher level of concentration is characteristic of children. They are used to analyze. They have to, because they have to differentiate between the 2 languages. Now, when it comes to offering models of speaking in French, I like to think of it as a workout, literally. Because speaking is a physical process. There are 37 muscles involved. Let me explain. First, you have to push the air from your lungs. You use muscles for that. The air goes through your vocal cords. They might vibrate, they might not vibrate. Then the air comes into your mouth. You have to direct the air through the nose in French for certain sounds, or not at all, or just outside the mouth. You also have to position your tongue. You have to position your lips. And sometimes you have to position your cheeks. So there's a lot of physical work. And the child needs to practice the sounds of the language he hears and speaks less in a minority setting. For instance, if you don't want your child to say bonjour, but say bonjour, he needs to practice that. There are sounds that are not the same in both languages. U is unique to French. The nasal vowels are unique to French. Same for English. The CH sound doesn't exist in English. Those diphthongs, that is the vowel you hear in boy or buy, doesn't exist in French. And a little amusing fact about the consonant R. In both languages, you use the opposite position of the muscle. It's just the opposite way. Unfortunately, R is the most frequent consonant in French. It needs to be practiced. And singing is great for that, by the way, because you can repeat and repeat the pronunciation. In a fun environment, there's no risk. You have a valid reason to repeat the same thing. Now, there's no need to prove the importance of vocabulary. When it comes to the young bilingual child, there's a few points that are worth mentioning. Because young bilingual children retain the words in the language they learn it first. For instance, if they go to the rec center with daddy, it will be rec center until they know that it is centre récréatif or centre de loisirs. And same with tutu, teddy bear. If they go to bed with tutu in French, that's the word they will first retain. So if you increase the vocabulary, you will reinforce bilingual literacy by helping the child understand that there are 2 words for the same thing. Dog, chien, cat, chat, pardon. And it will decrease the mixed language structures. Here are some examples of how to support your child to help him increase the vocabulary. Describe constantly what you're doing. Use the correct word. Cat, not kitty. Chat, not simitou. And when I say describe constantly, I mean it. Look, Sebastian, I'm going to change the diaper, and I'm removing the diaper from Samuel's little bottom. I'm lifting his leg. Describe everything. You increase his vocabulary, you form his ear. And read with the child. Make use of the illustration. Make it a game to find the illustration that matches a word. Ask him to find the word. You can use reading to build vocabulary. And finally, about teaching the child how to use the proper word associated with the proper language. You say something like, you say centre récréatif with mommy. With me, you say rec center. Centre récréatif is in French. In English, we say rec center. Now, our website gives detailed description of all the points I've presented tonight and much more. So let's go have a look. And allow me a few seconds to switch application. What you have in front of you is the home page of our website, Un enfant, deux langues, one child, two languages. It's available in both English and French. You can see that the buttons are at the top right corner. It is a work in progress because we will add new resources and topics. As a matter of fact, we will post my answers to some of the questions that we had yesterday in the French webinar, as well as the ones we'll have tonight. Don't worry, it will be anonymous. We won't mention names. Some of the questions were very interesting and were worth sharing. Let's look at the organization of the content. We've organized the content by subject, by age. We have a frequently asked question list, which we will add to. And we usually have a featured resource. In this case is the Linguistic Genius of Babies. We have alluded to that in my presentation. I encourage you to watch the video. And if you don't want to watch it in English, you want to watch it in other languages, there's a sub-program that allows you to have subtitles. Let's look at reference by subject. You have a clickable list of all the subjects. Let's choose, for instance, choosing the school, Francophone school or French immersion. You will have typically the main point, a description. Then you will have a section saying to find more, which are resources that you can click. For instance, to click on the table. It compares French language schools and French immersion. Now let's look at reference by age. It's a little different. Here you have icons. There are 8 categories. Let's open 34, 36 months. It is a fascinating period for vocabulary. Literally there's an explosion of vocabulary, but the pronunciation is still not quite there. Buy and go web center, you know. So again, you have the most important points. You have the resource, the section to find out more, and often clickable resources. Let's look at a wonderful guide from the Yukon. It's a practical guide for parents of children aged 0 to 7. It's mainly in French, but there are a lot of tips in English as well. And the approach one parent, one language is discussed, especially how to adjust. Finally, you can also access content by clicking on icons from the home page, the 8 topics. I invite you to explore this resource at your leisure or come back to it when you have a question. If you don't have a question, if you have a question and you don't find your answer, don't hesitate to drop us an email. We will answer you. You can also subscribe. You can also subscribe to our mailing list. As this functionality is available only in French, you'll be able to practice your French. That's on the home page. Now we are switching to applications for the Q&R period.
Hello again. So we're going to now begin our question period. We have a first question from a dad that says, I'm the French speaker at home, and I always speak French to my son, but his English, his mom speaks English with him, so he hears English most of the time. He just started French preschool in September and understands when we speak to him in French, but doesn't speak it yet. Is this normal, and will he eventually start speaking French?
Well, I hope so. You should be involved with your child. You should do a bit more activities with your child to help him express himself in French, to help him build vocabulary. It's important because it gives him a feeling of competency. Otherwise, school might be a bit more difficult. So you need to increase time in French with the child. Honestly, that's what you have to do.
Okay. We have another question. If a child is bombarded with so many sounds, is it good to add exposure to other languages, for example, Chinese, after an existing about 60 to 40 English-French exposure? What is threshold for too much language exposure, or is there one?
I don't know the answer to that. There might be one. I don't know it. In general, the younger the child, the more exposure he should have to as many languages as possible. He's building that data bank of sounds anyway, and he has to sort it out later on. So yes, you can expose him to many more languages than just two at an early age. And he will, as I said, he will discard what is irrelevant or less frequent anyway. This may be the time to talk about trilingualism, because usually what happens is that two languages are strong and dominant, and the third one is necessarily a very, very minor one, unfortunately. It's always the case.
Okay. Our next question is, my daughter is 6. She goes to French school, and French is present about 80% of the time in her life. She's now learning how to read in French. Should I also teach her how to read in English simultaneously, or should I wait? What's the best way to handle this?
You could teach her to read in English. It will increase bilingual literacy. There's enough, I assume this question comes from Quebec, perhaps?
I'm not too sure. No.
You're not so sure? Okay. No. There's nothing wrong with increasing the level of English and reading in English. The child, it will start making her learn English if she doesn't know it already. There's nothing wrong with that.
Okay, we're going to move on to the next question. I'm the non-Francophone person in my couple, and I have tried without too much success to learn to speak French. So I'm wondering, is it necessary for me to speak the language for my child to be bilingual?
No, but you have to show a very positive attitude and interest. And since you have tried to learn French, you can maintain a few things such as, what's the word for this in French, for instance? Or use a few. You must remember a few French words. Merci, bonjour, au revoir. Come on, use them.
Okay, the next question. What about the cases of Francophone father and French-speaking Anglophone mother? What risks are there to creating a strong bilingual child when they hear imperfect French and grammatical errors from the French-speaking Anglophone?
Yes, that's a tricky question. It is a concern because we think that it will make the child learn faulty language. True, he may retain some improper French, but it is much more important to show that the non-Francophone parent cares enough that he speaks French. It's the ultimate confirmation for the child that it is worth it to speak French, especially if it is in an English environment. I'd like to share a personal anecdote because my husband is an Anglophone who speaks French as a second language, and him being able to do that was like a revelation to some of our French children. Oh, you don't have to be Francophone to be bilingual. It was a revelation, and also they were able to understand what it could bring him. He was able to travel because he spoke French. He was in North Africa. Now they wanted to go to French immersion. It had that impact. Now it was not a bilingual family as the cases we've been discussing, but it had a huge impact on the children.
Okay, we have another question here. I often feel uncomfortable in public or with my family when my spouse speaks French with our children because nobody else understands. ...
Yes, it's not uncommon actually, but is there anything wrong about it? Because the child must learn that it is okay to speak another language in public. We in North America, we're very bizarre because North America and perhaps China are the only societies where people expect unilingualism to be the norm. In the rest of the world, people speak several languages. They are used to several languages spoken around them. And with globalization, it will also increase anyway. It's too bad. There's nothing wrong with it because it gives confidence to the kid. I don't know, people around you might find it bizarre. They might look at the mom and the child speaking French, probably not negatively or anything like that. It's an anomaly in my environment. Just that.
The next question, if only one of the parents speaks French, is it still a good idea to put our child in a Francophone school, or should we choose French immersion? What is the difference between the two?
Well, Francophone schools is the best for a strong bilingualism. And if you're lucky enough to have one of the parents able to support the kid in homework and relationship with the school, there you have it. Think about it another way. According to the Charter of Rights and Freedom, you have the right to put your child in a Francophone school, and it is the best way to make the child strongly bilingual. In fact, it's our children, once they have gone through the entire Francophone system from grade 1 to grade 12 in BC, and it's been proven in New Brunswick as well, when they write the provincial exams, their English is as strong, if not stronger, than their English counterparts. So no, there's no problem with putting the kid in the French school. It will have the support of the Francophone parents.
And isn't there also a double mandate to the French school as opposed to the French immersion school? About the
Remind me of it.
Yeah, about building. I think the Francophone school has the mission to build and work on building Francophone identity, not just the language.
Oh, absolutely, yes, because like French immersion is more like about awareness of the second language and that other culture. Francophone school is a very rich environment that promotes the sense of identity. Absolutely. And also the entire environment reinforces French. It's like a mini dominant society in an English society.
Okay. I think that's all the questions we have for tonight. So
excellent.
I would like to thank everybody for participating. If you still would like to ask questions, you can always send them to our website, and we will answer them individually. And I would like to thank you for participating, and I would like to thank our speaker, Annie, for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.